A promotional appearance spirals into chaos as Ben Affleck confronts Jimmy Kimmel over a series of uncomfortable jokes at his expense. What started as typical late-night banter quickly escalated into one of the most tense moments in talk show history, leaving the audience stunned and social media ablaze. The atmosphere in the studio was electric as Ben Affleck walked onto the set of Jimmy Kimmel Live to promote his latest directorial project. Fans cheered as the Oscar-winning director and actor shook Kimmel's hand with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Those paying close attention might have noticed the slight tension in Affleck's shoulders as he settled into the guest chair. "Ben Affleck, everyone," Kimmel announced with his trademark grin. "Great to have you back on the show." "Good to be here," Affleck replied, smoothing his tie. The audience couldn't have known that backstage. Kimmel's production team had already created friction by changing the agreed-upon talking points without informing Affleck's publicist. Kimmel launched into his monologue with practiced ease. "So, Ben, you're here promoting your new film, which I have to say looks fantastic, almost as fantastic as your career resurrection after Batman. I mean, talk about a phoenix rising from the ashes of a batsuit." A tight smile crossed Affleck's face. The joke struck a nerve. Affleck had been open in past interviews about the toll the Batman role had taken on him personally, but he nodded politely, determined to keep things professional. "It's been a journey," he responded diplomatically. "This new project is really something I'm proud of. We assembled an incredible team." "Speaking of assembling," Kimmel interrupted, "I saw your ex-wife Jennifer Garner last week. She looks amazing, like, really amazing. Almost like she's thriving without—" He paused for effect. "Certain complications in her life." The audience's reaction was mixed. Uncomfortable laughter tinged with tension. Anyone familiar with Affleck's history knew he had been open about his struggles with alcohol and the toll it took on his marriage. This was dangerous territory, and the cameraman caught the slight narrowing of Affleck's eyes. "Jimmy," Affleck said calmly, though a muscle in his jaw twitched, "I'm here to talk about the film." Of course," Kimmel continued, seemingly oblivious to the growing discomfort. "But you know how it works. People are interested in your personal life. Speaking of which, how's the dating scene treating you these days? I heard you're back with J.Lo." Again. Talk about a sequel nobody asked for. The audience gasped. Even Kimmel's band leader shot him a warning glance. Affleck's expression darkened visibly, his easy smile completely gone now. He took a slow sip of water, clearly trying to compose himself. "I'd appreciate it if we could focus on the work," Affleck said, his voice measured but firm. "My personal life isn't why I'm here tonight." Rather than take the hint, Kimmel seemed to double down. "Come on, Ben. You can't come on a talk show and expect to only talk about work. That's not how this works. The audience wants the juicy stuff." The camera panned to the audience, many of whom looked uncomfortable rather than eager. Kimmel gestured to a screen behind them. "In fact, we've prepared a little montage of your greatest relationship hits and misses. Let's roll the tape." "No," Affleck said firmly, loud enough to be picked up clearly by his microphone. "That's not happening." The producer in the control room wisely didn't play the video package. An uncomfortable silence settled over the studio as host and guest locked eyes in a silent power struggle. "Seems like someone can't take a joke tonight," Kimmel said with a forced laugh, trying to salvage the situation. "Let's take a commercial break, and when we come back, maybe Mr. Serious here will have lightened up a bit." As the cameras cut away, the audience could see Affleck leaning forward to say something to Kimmel that couldn't be heard on the microphones. Whatever it was, Kimmel's smirk faltered. When the show returned from commercial, the tension was palpable. Kimmel attempted to steer the conversation back to safer territory, but the damage was done. Affleck's responses became increasingly clipped and formal. "So your new film deals with themes of betrayal and public humiliation," Kimmel said, trying to sound engaged. "What drew you to that material?" "Interesting you should ask about public humiliation, Jimmy," Affleck replied, his voice steady but with an edge that couldn't be missed. Sometimes people in positions of power think they can humiliate others for entertainment. They mistake cruelty for comedy. The studio fell silent. Even the band stopped their background music. "Are we still talking about the movie?" Kimmel asked with a nervous laugh. "I think we both know we're not," Affleck replied. "You've spent years building a brand on making people uncomfortable for laughs. But there's a line between playful banter and deliberately bringing up painful parts of someone's past for ratings." Kimmel's face reddened. "Now wait a minute." "No, you wait," Affleck said, his voice rising slightly. "I agreed to come on this show to talk about a project that dozens of talented people poured their hearts into. Instead, you've tried to ambush me with questions about my ex-wife, my personal struggles, and relationships that have nothing to do with why I'm here." The audience, sensing they were witnessing something raw and unscripted, remained deathly quiet. Social media was already lighting up as crew members surreptitiously grabbed clips for online platforms. "That's not fair, Ben," Kimmel said, dropping his comedic facade. "This is a comedy show. People tune in for entertainment, not just to hear actors drone on about their artistic vision." "Comedy shouldn't come at the expense of someone's dignity," Affleck countered. "And you know what? I think your audience is smarter than you give them credit for. They don't need you to dredge up painful chapters of someone's life to be entertained." The tension between the two men was electric. What had started as typical talk show banter had evolved into something much more significant. A confrontation about the very nature of entertainment and where the line should be drawn. As Kimmel opened his mouth to respond, the show's producers frantically signaled from offstage. The carefully planned segment was spiraling out of control, and millions were watching it unfold in real time. "We'll be right back after these messages," Kimmel said abruptly, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. As the cameras cut away, Affleck removed his microphone and stood up. The audience could see but not hear the heated exchange that followed, with Kimmel rising from his desk and gesturing emphatically. Whatever was being said, it was clear this confrontation was far from over, and the damage control hadn't even begun. Backstage crew members froze in place as Affleck and Kimmel continued, their heated exchange away from the audience's ears. The show's executive producer rushed toward them, panic evident on his face. "You think this is funny?" Affleck demanded, his voice low but intense. "Ambushing me with questions about my marriage, my struggles with addiction? That was all cleared as off-limits before I agreed to come on this show." Kimmel's typical smirk had vanished completely. "It's just entertainment, Ben. The audience expects—" "I don't care what you think the audience expects," Affleck cut him off. "That doesn't give you the right to exploit someone's personal pain for ratings." A production assistant nervously approached. "We're back on in 30 seconds. Kimmel straightened his tie, attempting to regain his composure. "Are you staying or not?" Affleck hesitated, clearly weighing his options. Walking off would create headlines, but staying might give him a chance to address what had just happened. After a tense moment, he reluctantly picked up his microphone and returned to the guest chair. "And we're back in 5, 4, 3. The floor director counted down silently with fingers for the final numbers. The red light on the camera blinked on, and Kimmel plastered his signature grin back on his face, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Welcome back. If you're just joining us, we're here with Ben Affleck, and we're having a spirited conversation." The audience laughed nervously, unsure how to react to the palpable tension. Affleck leaned forward in his chair. "Actually, Jimmy, before we continue, I'd like to address what just happened." A flash of alarm crossed Kimmel's face, but he nodded. "Floor's yours." "I think your viewers deserve some honesty," Affleck said, his voice steady. "What they just witnessed wasn't scripted banter. It was a fundamental disagreement about respect." The audience was utterly silent now, sensing the authenticity of the moment. "For years, I've watched your show use people's personal struggles as punchlines," Affleck continued. "Not just mine. Countless guests who come here to promote their work end up being ambushed with jokes about their divorces, their mental health issues, their addictions. Kimmel shifted uncomfortably. That's a pretty serious accusation, Ben. We prep all our guests. Do you? Affleck challenged. Because my team specifically outlined topics that were off-limits, and you deliberately brought up every single one of them? The camera switched to a two-shot, capturing both men's expressions. Kimmel's usual confident demeanor had cracked, revealing a mixture of defensiveness and calculation as he realized the situation was spinning beyond his control. Look, Kimmel said, attempting to regain ground. Part of coming on these shows is understanding that we need to entertain people. Sometimes that means pushing boundaries. There's a difference between pushing boundaries and crossing lines, Affleck replied. And you know exactly where that line is. You just choose to ignore it. Social media was exploding. Clips of the confrontation were already trending, with viewers taking sides. Production assistants were frantically showing their phones to the executive producer, who was motioning for Kimmel to wrap up the segment. Maybe we should move on to a game or something, Kimmel suggested with forced levity. We usually have our guests play. I'm not here to play games, Affleck interrupted. I'm here because I believed you'd give me a platform to talk about a film that means a great deal to me. Instead, you've turned this into exactly what's wrong with parts of the entertainment industry. Exploitation disguised as humor. The studio audience began to murmur. Some people were nodding in agreement with Affleck. Others looked uncomfortable, as if witnessing a car crash in slow motion. That's not fair, Kimmel protested, his voice rising. Our viewers tune in for jokes and entertainment. If everyone came on just to plug their projects without any actual conversation, is that what you call conversation? Affleck shot back. Dredging up someone's ex-wife? Making jokes about addiction when you know I've been open about my struggles with that? That's not conversation, Jimmy. That's bullying with a laugh track. The word bullying hung in the air. The audience's reaction was mixed. Some gasped, others applauded. Kimmel's face flushed red. Now wait just a minute, Kimmel said, his voice tight. I've been doing this show for years. We've always treated our guests with respect. Selective respect, maybe, Affleck responded. For the ones who play along with the humiliation. For the ones who laugh at themselves even when the jokes cut too deep. But not everybody wants to participate in that kind of entertainment. Kimmel glanced off stage, clearly looking for support from his producers. Finding none, he tried a different approach. Look, if I crossed a line, I apologize, he said, though his tone lacked sincerity. But this is how talk shows work. Everyone knows the deal when they come on. Maybe that's the problem, Affleck said quietly. Maybe we've all accepted a system that values humiliation over genuine connection. Maybe it's time for that to change. The audience erupted into applause, surprising. Both men. Kimmel looked stunned, clearly not expecting the crowd to side with his guest over him. As the applause died down, a production assistant frantically signaled from offstage, drawing a finger across her throat, the universal sign to cut the segment short. We'll be right back after these messages, Kimmel said hurriedly. But before the cameras could cut away, Affleck leaned forward. No, I don't think we will be right back. At least not with me in that chair. The camera caught Kimmel's expression, a mixture of shock and barely concealed anger. What are you saying? I'm saying I'm done, Affleck replied, standing up once more. This interview is over. The director, panicking, tried to cut to commercial, but not before the cameras captured Affleck removing his microphone for the second time and placing it deliberately on Kimmel's desk. You can't just walk off in the middle of a show, Kimmel said, also standing now, his voice raised enough that the microphone still picked it up clearly. Affleck turned to face him one last time. Watch me. The audience gasped collectively as Affleck turned and walked toward the exit. The stage manager, completely thrown off script, frantically motioned for the house band to start playing. The camera awkwardly cut between Kimmel's thunderstruck expression and Affleck's retreating back. As Affleck disappeared backstage, the studio erupted into chaos. The house band played frantically, trying to fill the sudden void. Kimmel stood frozen behind his desk, the cameras still rolling as the producer's voice screamed in his earpiece to salvage the situation. "Well," Kimmel finally managed, forcing a laugh that sounded hollow even to his own ears. "I guess Ben Affleck has left the building. We'll be right back after these messages with whoever's still willing to sit in that chair." The moment the on-air light blinked off, Kimmel ripped out his earpiece. "What the hell just happened?" he demanded to no one in particular. Backstage, Affleck was surrounded by his publicist and the show's executive producer, both speaking rapidly and simultaneously. "Ben, you can't just walk off," the executive producer pleaded. "We have another segment planned. We can smooth this over." "There's nothing to smooth over," Affleck replied, his voice calm but firm. "I made my position clear." His publicist pulled him aside. "This is going to be everywhere in 5 minutes. We need to get ahead of it." Indeed, phones throughout the audience were already lighting up as clips began circulating online. Kimmel's Affleck was trending before the commercial break had even ended. Back on set, the production team huddled around Kimmel, who was visibly seething. "He made me look like a bully on my own show," he fumed. "Get him back out here." "He's already heading for the exit," an assistant reported. "His car is waiting." As the countdown to return from commercial began, Kimmel made a decision. He straightened his tie and prepared to do what he'd always done best: turn the situation into comedy, with himself controlling the narrative. The on-air light blinked on. "Welcome back," Kimmel said, his trademark smirk firmly in place. "So that happened. Apparently Ben Affleck isn't a fan of my interview style. Who knew Batman could be so sensitive?" He waited for the audience's laughter, but it didn't come. Instead, an uncomfortable silence filled the studio. Meanwhile, Affleck had reached the building's exit when he paused, looking at the feed on a nearby monitor. As he watched Kimmel attempting to spin the situation, something shifted in his expression. "You know what?" he said to his publicist. "I'm not done." Before anyone could stop him, Affleck turned and marched back toward the studio. The security guards, recognizing him, didn't try to intervene as he pushed through the doors just as Kimmel was mid-sentence. "And really, if you can't take a joke about your personal life, maybe don't become a celebrity in the first." The audience's sudden reaction alerted Kimmel to Affleck's return. The camera swung around to capture the actor striding purposefully back onto the set. Kimmel's expression flickered between shock and alarm. "You weren't finished?" he asked, attempting to sound jovial but failing to mask his nervousness. Affleck didn't sit down. Instead, he stood center stage, commanding the attention of everyone in the room. "No, I wasn't," he said, his voice steady. "I was about to leave, but then I realized something. Walking away doesn't solve the problem. It just perpetuates it." The audience was utterly silent, captivated by the unscripted drama unfolding before them. "So here's what's going to happen," Affleck continued. "We're going to have an actual conversation. Not the kind where you ambush your guests for laughs, but a real discussion about the responsibility that comes with platforms like yours." Kimmel glanced off stage, clearly looking for direction from his producers, but found none. This was uncharted territory for the veteran host. "Look, Ben," he began, struggling to regain control of his show, "I think you're blowing this out of proportion. It was just a few jokes." "It's never just a few jokes," Affleck interrupted. "Not when they're at the expense of someone's mental health, their recovery journey, or their family. You know that. Your audience knows that. And it's time we acknowledge it." The audience erupted into spontaneous applause, catching Kimmel off guard. He looked out at the crowd, seemingly realizing for the first time that public sentiment wasn't automatically on his side. "This isn't just about me," Affleck continued as the applause died down. It's about every guest who comes on shows like this, dreading what personal trauma you'll exploit for entertainment. It's about an industry that's normalized humiliation as a form of promotion. Kimmel's facade began to crack. His typical smugness gave way to what appeared to be genuine reflection. Whether it was sincere or simply a calculated response to read the room remained unclear. "So you're saying I should never joke about celebrities?" he asked, trying to find solid ground. "I'm saying there's a difference between good-natured ribbing and deliberately targeting someone's pain," Affleck replied. "And I think you're smart enough to know the difference." An unexpected hush fell over the studio. In that moment, something shifted in the dynamic between the two men. Kimmel seemed to recognize that he had miscalculated, not just with Affleck, but with his audience. "You're right," Kimmel finally said, the words clearly difficult for him. "I crossed a line tonight." The admission hung in the air. No one, least of all Affleck, had expected this turn of events. "The truth is," Kimmel continued, sounding uncharacteristically genuine, "it's easy to forget there are real people behind the jokes. The pressure to get laughs, it can make you lose perspective." Affleck nodded, his posture relaxing slightly. "That's all I'm asking for. Perspective. Remembering that behind every headline you mock is a human being dealing with real consequences." As the two men regarded each other, the audience witnessed something rare in the carefully scripted world of late-night television, an authentic moment of reckoning. "So," Kimmel said, clearing his throat, "would you be willing to sit back down and have the conversation we should have had from the beginning? About your film, your work. No ambushes, no cheap shots." Affleck considered the offer. Then, to the audience's surprise, he nodded and returned to the guest chair. "I'm willing if you are." What followed was unlike any segment in the show's history. For the next 10 minutes, host and guest engaged in a substantive conversation about Affleck's directorial project, the challenges of the industry, and the responsibility of media platforms. No jokes at anyone's expense, no ambushes, just genuine dialogue. As the segment drew to a close, Kimmel extended his hand. "Thank you for coming back," he said. "And for calling me out when I needed it." Affleck shook his hand. "Sometimes the most important conversations are the uncomfortable ones." The show cut to commercial for the final time that night, but the impact of what had transpired would reverberate far beyond the studio walls. By morning, the confrontation had been viewed millions of times across social media platforms, sparking widespread discussions about boundaries, respect, and the nature of entertainment. Network executives were reportedly in emergency meetings about the future direction of Jimmy Kimmel Live, while entertainment analysts predicted lasting changes to how talk shows approached celebrity interviews. For Affleck, what had begun as a routine promotional appearance had evolved into something far more significant, a watershed moment that challenged the status quo of an industry long overdue for reflection. And for viewers at home, it served as a powerful reminder that behind every public figure is a person deserving of basic dignity and respect, a lesson far more valuable than any punchline could ever be.